The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Oh, happy Passover and happy draft week. It's finally here. My God, we can stop obsessing over which quarterback it's going to be. We will know by Thursday night, early in the evening, assuming they don't trade out of the number 2. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. Adam Peters has indicated it's very unlikely to happen. We will finally end all this speculation and find out who the quarterback of the future will be for the Washington Commanders, at least for the near future, and hopefully for the long-term future. But we can finally stop all that. Caps, team that doesn't score goals, giving up 3 within a 2-minute stretch of the second period. That's not going to get it done. We'll look into that. And how about the Nats? Yeah, Mitchell Parker, who was called up from the minors where he was just sort of But Josiah Gray comes up with an injury. They call him up last week, pitches great against the Dodgers, and yesterday against the Astros to round out a very warm and fuzzy weekend where they celebrated the 5th anniversary of the World Series championship. He was even better, and he's 2-0 on the year with an ERA of 1.15. Nice. We'll get to that. Also, coming up in the next hour, we'll look back on an innovation that happened 70 years ago today that probably saved the NBA. I don't think that's an overstatement because in the early 1950s, without the shot clock, it was a dreadful game. It was a dull game, and people were not showing up to watch the NBA. And what Danny Biasone came up with 70 years ago today was truly huge in the future of the game. And to tell you what a great innovation it was, 70 years later, there is still a 24-second shot clock. They never felt the need to make it a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. They futzed with it a lot in college basketball. College basketball, incredibly, didn't have a shot clock until, I believe, 1986. And first it was 35. I think now it's down to 30. I don't know if they'll go to a 24-second clock. I kind of like the 30. I think that's pretty good. Set up your offense a little bit better. But in the NBA, the 24-second clock has stuck, and so has the league. And whatever you want to say about too many playoff teams and the load management and all the other kvetching that we do about the NBA, the league is successful. And it's successful largely on the shoulders of Danny Biasone, who 70 years ago today came up with the shot clock. I'll give you a little history lesson on that a little bit later. But recent history for the Capitals, not good.
Capitals just going to pull it back here with Trevor Van Riemsdyk with 10 seconds to go, and he is not going to leave in behind the net. That's where this game's going to come to a conclusion when the clock hits 0. The Washington Capitals will look to even this best-of-7 series on Tuesday night. They fall to the Rangers by a 4-1 final here in Game 1 at Madison Square Garden.
That's John Walton on the Caps Radio Network. We used to joke about what's red, white, and blue and plays golf in May. They may avoid the golf course in May, but that would mean that they have to avoid getting swept. They got Game 2 tomorrow night. Then they come home Friday to play the Caps. That's a 7 o'clock face-off, and Sunday would be Game 4 at 8 o'clock. If it goes to 5 and they go back to New York, that's May the 1st. So they would avoid the golf course at least for the first day of May. And if it goes all 7, it would wrap up on May 5th. But the problem with the Capitals is they don't score. They went into the playoffs with the biggest goal differential in history. Now, part of that's skewed because they've expanded the playoffs, so there are more playoff teams. But generally, if you're a good team, you're outscoring your opponents. The Capitals went into the playoffs with a goal differential of minus 37. Minus 37. So teams over the course of the year, you're playing 82 games, they're outscoring you by almost half a goal a game. And as Barry Zerluga points out in his column today, they had 21-goal games during the regular season, exactly half of their 40 wins. They scored more than 2 goals just once in their last 11 games and somehow finished on a 4-1-0 run, grabbing every point needed to be granted the opportunity to be in the playoffs. So, when we used to kind of make snide remarks about the Capitals in the playoffs prior to them winning the Stanley Cup in 2018, it was based on good regular seasons where they would generally disappoint in the playoffs. And there were just so many years like Pittsburgh just drove a dagger into them. And sometimes they'd have 2-1 and even 3-1 leads on the Penguins, and the Penguins would come back and win the series. This year they're playing with house money. You know, this team, they sold at the deadline. They got rid of Anthony Mantha, who was a 20-goal scorer at that point. They were looking to rebuild, it looked like, although, you know, Alex Ovechkin is going to be around for at least another year, probably 2, as he needs 42 to pass the great one, Wayne Gretzky. But it looked like, okay, they decided that it wasn't going to happen this year, and if it did, great, but if it didn't, that's fine. Getting ready for next year for more draft picks and things like that. But they did play very well down the stretch. Credit to Spencer Carbury, who Barry wrote a really nice column about on Saturday. He talked about that when he leaves the office, his office, I guess it's in Virginia, Boston, he leaves his laptop there. He's got 2 kids, 12 and 10, and he considers it family time, and he does not, you know, look at his work while he's at home. However, as Barry says later in the column, sometimes he wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning, can't sleep, and goes into the office. So, you know, these guys are obsessive in what they do. That's what makes them as good as they are, and Carberry obviously has been a very good find this year. He had to change the team. I mean, it wasn't working in the early part of the season, and Ovechkin hardly scored any goals in the first half of the year. I think he scored like 8 in the first 40 games or something like that, and then, you know, had a good second half with 31. They have to score goals, and if they don't score goals, you can't have a 3-goal flurry like the Rangers had in the second period. And, you know, on balance, look at it this way, as Barry has in his column today. Check the 82-game evidence. The Rangers ranked 7th in the NHL in both goals for and against. They had the 3rd best power play and the 3rd best penalty kill. That's balance. Washington ranks in those 4 categories 28th, 16th, 18th, though the power play was outstanding in the second half of the season, and 19th. Yes, the power play may have been outstanding, but yesterday they were 0 for 4. And more importantly, for Spencer Carbury, they had only 21 shots on goal.
Spencer, you said the other day that 22, 23 shots wouldn't be enough. I think you had 21 tonight. But how do you guys generate more shots at the net?
Yeah, we got to do a way better job offensively. It's no secret. We struggled all year, but we've got to find ways to create more on the interior. We got to skate out of pressure. We got to keep pucks off the yellow. We continually just rim pucks around. We've got to do a better job offensively.
Yeah, and he said, look, the reality is we're going to win 3-2 games. That's what they have to do. Well, if you give up 4, obviously that's not going to happen. This is a long-time star. He goes back to the championship team, Tom Wilson.
You know, tough building to come into. You know, they owned probably 5 minutes of that game, and we got behind. So it's one of those things you got to manage the atmosphere a little bit when they get rolling. Other than that, we did some good things. Probably got to get a little bit more to their net, generate a little more offense. But it wasn't, you know, first period wasn't a bad road period, and then they kind of jumped on us in the second a little bit, and we dug ourselves a bit of a hole.
Against that team, you got to capitalize on your power play opportunity.
Yeah, power play obviously wasn't good enough tonight. At this time of year, it's huge. You got to make a difference. You know, the special teams battle needs to kind of shift our way if we can, and obviously would have liked to have one on the power play. We'll go over some film and try and improve on it.
How do you guys get more shots, Tom?
You know, we can get more pucks to the net for sure. It's not always just about, you know, shots. I think it's just generating. You know, we had some decent looks offensively, but got to get to the net a little bit more for sure.
Yeah, here's what hockey dopes like me say at this time of year every year. You got to get more traffic around the net. Yeah, you got to get more shots, and 0 for 4 on the power play, not going to get it done. I don't think Alex Ovechkin had a shot on goal with the whole team with just 21 shots, and that's not going to make it happen. Also, this series, I guess after this series, it all shifts over to network, but they give the local announcers, TV announcers, a shot in the first round. So you had a choice yesterday between the ESPN coverage and Joe Beninati and Craig Laughlin on Monumental, and you'll have that through the rest of the series. They shift now to coverage on TNT and True TV when they come back here to Washington. Game 2 tomorrow night will be on ESPN as well. But I admit this. I watch very little regular season hockey. I did watch the final game against the Flyers to see if they would get in, but Craig Laughlin and Joe Beninati are great. I mean, I say this, and people who love hockey are going to hate this, but it's almost a shame to me that they do hockey because they're so good together. They're great. I mean, and they explain the game, and they know at this time of year they're getting more people like me who don't necessarily follow them as closely during the season and watch during the playoffs. So they're just entertaining. They explain the game. They know the game. The chemistry between them, you can't try and recreate that. That's over 20-plus years, probably doing at least 25. And they just do a great job. If they make it to the second round, it's a shame that they won't get to do the games. But enjoy them while you can. You got at least 3 more of them. And you do have a choice, but my choice was Locker and Beninati. They're just great on Monumental. How about this guy that the Nats just called up last week? Not yesterday, but Mitchell Parker, left-hander. He pitched like 6 innings in spring training. He was doing okay in AAA, not lighting things up, but they ran into an emergency last week in Los Angeles when Josiah Gray couldn't go. And they call him up, and I think he gave up 2 runs over 6 innings. They won the game 4-2. He had some strikeouts. He had good control. He looked really good. And then yesterday, as they wrapped up the series against Houston, he was tremendous. He threw 7 innings. He gave up only 3 hits, didn't walk anybody, struck out 8, upped his record to 2-0 with 73 pitches, and his ERA 1.50. Now, they were trying to drill down on Davey Martinez after the game as to why they didn't break camp with this guy. I mean, pitchers like this and left-handers, they're hard to find. And here's a guy who's been great his last 2 outings. It was kind of like, hey, Davey, what were you guys thinking when you sent him down to the minors when you broke for the regular season? Here's his analysis of what we saw from him yesterday.
The biggest thing for him, even in spring training, is understand, where your swings and misses are, where's your the contact, right? And it's always up down. It's never out, So up down is good for him. He's got a really good curveball, really good fastball. His changeup was really, really good today, but everything was over the plate. So he started doing that in spring training. We started seeing him doing it, and he was lights out. The big thing now is to build him up a little bit because he went 4, he went 5, and we pushed him to 7. I was biting my lip, but I just couldn't do it to him, because we need him for the long haul.
Can you talk, I guess, a little more about what specifically you saw from him in spring training that indicated this, starts like this might be possible? Yeah,
like I said, his ability to pitch a top above the zone and also pitch down in the zone as well with both pitches, his curveball, his fastball, and when his changeup's on like it was today, he could be really effective. We saw him in LA. His changeup wasn't very good, so I told him to axe it and just go curveball, fastball, and he did really well. We're just doing that, Today his changeup was good. He threw it, and he threw it very effective.
Do you start having conversations with yourself about a 6-man rotation if he does keep this up?
I haven't had those conversations yet. I have a lot of conversations by myself. That ain't one of them yet. I don't want to sound crazy, but I do. But it's that hasn't come up yet. He's gonna get his next start. We hope that Josiah Gray gets healthy soon. He comes back, and then we'll have some decisions to make. But he's done really well.
Well, they're going to throw Patrick Corbin tomorrow night. They got a day off today. Corbin's going against the Dodgers tomorrow. His ERA is pretty much where it's been since they won the World Series. It's over 8. I think he's 0-2 or 0-3. And you got to pay him through this year. And he does eat innings. He stays out there, gives up a lot of runs. But, you're only a game under 500. It's not impossible that you make a run at a wild card this year. And if this kid, he's 24. He's not some 20-year-old phenom. He's 24. He's been around a while. He's a left-hander. If he and Corbin's a left-hander as well. But if you feel like he can give you outings like this on a fairly regular basis, you got to get him into the 5-man rotation. Forget the 6. These don't come along very often. And he had tremendous yesterday. No walks, struck out 8, 3 hits over 7 innings against the Astros. I know they're not having a great start to the season, but they're a World Series caliber team, and I got to think that at some point, if this team continues to play well, and they're playing well again, just a game under 500, you got to think about putting them into the 5-man rotation, not the 6-man rotation. Tom Pelissero out at the weekend festivities. I saw some of the highlights on TV. They did not have Steven Strasburg there, which was kind of surprising because I thought either a week ago or 2 weeks ago, when they worked things out so he could announce his retirement and get all the money, that was kind of contentious for a while with them insisting he had to show up at spring training and, all the machinations that were going on behind the scenes to negotiate what was left of the deal, which was over $100 million. He thought he'd make an appearance. He did not. Ryan Zimmerman was there, Kurt Suzuki, Brian Dozier, Howie Kendrick, Max Scherzer and Juan Soto had video messages that were played in the ballpark. It was a nice thing. You'd have thought that Strasburg would have at least tipped his cap. Tom thinks that they'll have a Steven Strasburg day some point later in the season, which makes sense. They'll retire his number and put him in the Ring of Honor and so forth. But Tom had a chance to talk to Howie Kendrick, who just a great guy to deal with when he played for the Nationals, and probably one day will either be in a front office or a manager somewhere. He's working for the Phillies now. But Tom makes the point that Kendrick, as valuable as Strasburg was, may have been just as valuable. Batted .344 with 17 home runs and 62 runs batted in 370 plate appearances, while seeing playing time at first, second, and third during that championship year. He blasted a grand slam off Dodgers reliever Joe Kelly in the 10th inning of Game 5 of the National League Division Series, which gave Washington a 7-3 win in the series-deciding game. Then Kendrick was named NL Championship MVP after going 5 for 15 with 4 runs batted in Washington's 4-game sweep of the Cardinals. And then, of course, the clank homer off the foul pole in Game 7 of the World Series that propelled them to win 6-2 and the championship. Now working as a special assistant to the Phillies GM, doing a lot of community service work with baseball's RBI youth program. I've had long discussions with Howie about getting more African Americans involved in baseball, and he's very passionate about that. I hope he winds up back in this city. And in fact, I'm going to see Mike Rizzo at Tom's cigar event, which is at Shelley's back room on May the 6th, and I hope to ask him about the future of Howie Kendrick in the organization. So, some warm feelings. If you missed this, Zimmerman talked about Strasburg over the weekend and said he literally threw his arm off for us to win the World Series. He was the World Series MVP, and that was pretty much it. What does he pitch, 50-some innings since then? And, yeah, the contract was a complete disaster, but I have no second thoughts. They did the right thing at that time by giving him an extension. It did not work out, but he delivered a World Series, which Washington hadn't won in 95 years or 90 years, whatever it was. That was a big thing, 95 years. All right, coming up, we'll get to more draft yak. Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network on with Rich Eisen, plus a really good tweet from Jay Gruden on this big flap over Top Golf and bringing in 4 quarterbacks and not giving them the individual attention that some like Mike Florio thought they deserved. I'll get to that tweet and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We got Tony in at 11 o'clock today, and in the next hour we'll hear what Al Michaels has to say about the greatest athlete ever. Yeah, we haven't quite reached that summer lull yet, but Al was on the Dan Patrick Show last week and had some thoughts on who he thinks is the best ever. There are sports where it's argued. Football now, you might say Jim Brown, you might say Jerry Rice. Tom Brady is obviously the one who's vaulted into that spot with the 7 Super Bowls, but you could make cases for other players. Basketball, LeBron, Jordan, Hockey, there's no doubt. It's Wayne Gretzky. But who's the best of the best? And Al takes a look at that coming up. The quarterback draft stuff as we head into that on Thursday, it's just completely nuts. I mean, I've seen the Washington football team in the last 30 years select way up at the top of the draft too many damn times. And it hasn't really worked out, whether it was Desmond Howard, who went number 4 overall, and they traded 2 number 1 picks to get into that spot in 1992, whether it was Heath Schuler in 1993 as the number 3 pick of the draft. The following year, Michael Westbrook went number 4. RG3, on balance, bust, gave you one spectacular year, and then that was it. Chase Young, I think we write that off as a bust. All they got was, a 3rd-round pick in return for him. And now the quarterback, but I've never seen anything like this. We've known when they've been picking at the top of the draft generally what they're going to do. It's head-spinning as to what can happen. Now, Jaden Daniels, at least until this Top Golf thing bubbled up, was seemingly pretty certain to go number 2, and maybe he will. But off of that, and I'll get more into that about all the speculation about how it threw his nose out of joint and his agent got angry and all that stuff. But this J.J. McCarthy thing is crazy. Like, we went into the draft season, which was, post-Super Bowl, and you go, oh, yeah, McCarthy's clearly the 4th guy. Well, the betting odds are moving up. He has gone from 20-1 to be taken number 2 by the Commanders to 17-1, now to 11-1. And some of it is the speculation about Daniels and his agent not being happy about getting into like a cattle call with the other quarterbacks at Top Golf this past week. And some of it is that you're just hearing more and more things about how impressive he has been. And Jason LaCanfora had a column over the weekend where he writes, Drake May is the biggest wild card of all of this, said a general manager of a team that has done significant work on quarterbacks. Some guys love him and think he could end up as the best quarterback in this class, and some legitimately think he's a mid-round pick. 2 general managers told me they believe that if the Commanders let the analytics guide them, McCarthy is their guess for the number 2 pick. If the team's coaches hold significant sway and offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury's voice resonates, then Daniels would be the selection. Both general managers also believe Daniels would love to be a Raider. So who knows what. The consensus, though, at number 1 seems to be it's going to be Caleb Williams. There's not much pushback on that. Some say Daniels has been so impressive he could move up to number 1 and be taken by Chicago. But Tom Pelissero, who covers the league for the NFL Network, was on the Rich Eisen show on Friday, and he believes that Williams will go number 1 and believes that this has been in the works for some time.
From the time that he was like 10 years old, and his dad, Carl, who's a successful businessman, he's worked in the athletic training space, they've had a singular goal. Let's get this guy in a position where he's going to be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. They have done that by doing it their own way, and they haven't been concerned about, well, this isn't how other people would do things. You look selfish. They don't care. They're going to make the right decisions for Caleb Williams. So through the course of this process, you've seen Caleb has not had a traditional agent. He's had the team of advisors and attorneys and other people who have guided this process for him. He paused his pre-draft training, went to Tokyo with his girlfriend on a vacation for a while. He didn't do the medical testing that is standardized and 99.999% of guys have gone through the years. He only took 1 visit, and that was to the Bears. And so there's every reason to believe, based upon the history here, that things might end up being interesting in the contract process as well. It's been reported that his dad, Carl Williams, has in the past expressed to people that potentially equity in a team would be something that they would be interested in. The NFL a year or so ago passed a bylaw in which it says you can't have a player or any other employee owning equity in a team, which I can't tell you what the origins of that rule were, Rich, but certainly it seemed like it was a preemptive type of a thing for people like Caleb Williams or other players coming into the league who might make those types of demands. The bottom line is this: contracts have been slotted for rookies since 2011. there's not a lot of wiggle room. We know that there have been contracts that have gotten hung up on offset language, bonus payment structure, and things like that. But if you just go through everything that Caleb and his team have done here, you'd say nothing is just going to happen the normal cause of business. It's not just going to be they're going to work out the offset language and get the thing done a few days before training camp. I'm not saying there's a holdout or anything else. It's just every part of this process has been a little bit different for Caleb. I think if you go back to the start of the process, I know the Bears would not have been the team that they were targeting to go to here, but Chicago owned that number one pick. They've had a lot of very frank and honest and positive discussions between Caleb Williams' team and the Bears. What Caleb and his people want to make sure is that you've got the infrastructure, the resources, the investment to let him go out there and chase the next goal, which is win a whole bunch of Super Bowls, be the greatest of all time. What have the Bears done in this offseason? They went out and got an offensive coordinator that they think is a fit in Shane Waldron, who's worked with different styles of quarterbacks. They retained Chris Morgan, who's one of the top offensive line coaches they think can help the run game. They signed DeAndre Swift. They traded for Keenan Allen. They really signaled to Caleb, you're our guy, we're all in, by trading Justin Fields for a sixth-round pick. When they did, my understanding is the sides are in a good place right now. When he came in for the visit, they had him go out to dinner with some of the veteran players. Those guys, I'm told, were really impressed with Caleb as well. All indications are, barring something going totally haywire here, he's going to be the quarterback of the Chicago Bears. What takes place, really, not just through this offseason and getting the contract done, but in his career. He's going to do things his own way. It's worked for him to this point. He's about to check the box as the number one overall pick, and now it's on to the next goal.
Yeah, except if Chicago looks at it and zooms out and says, this guy's going to be a pain in the tuchus over contracts every year, and especially the first one. Maybe we don't want to deal with that. And maybe we think Daniels is so good that maybe he should be the number one pick. Now, there are some drawbacks, as Pelissero points out, about Daniels.
2 years ago, he weighed in, this was verified, a $190, and he takes hellacious hits. If you've seen the edit that's been going around social media, Rich, of the hits on Jane Daniels set to the Looney Tunes music, it's pretty good. It's pretty funny.
I have not seen that. However, the quote on this particular red flag involving Jaden Daniels that jumped out at me from your 13,000 words is you quoted an NFL executive talking about his skinny body. Quote, he has a borderline Merton Hanks neck. That one jumped out at me, Tom.
I was just glad I got that one through the editor's Rich. You never know if a reference is too obscure.
No, I got
Merton Hanks like 30 years ago, but you and I were both on the same page. And as soon as that was said, I was like, I know exactly what that looks like. Listen, he's a narrow-framed type of an individual. I mean, you talk to people at Arizona State. I know, one of the issues was why can't he put on weight? Is it, there was talk about does he need, his own nutrition program? There's people who thought, it was a commitment thing. But, listen, he did bulk up. He showed up at Pro Day at 210, which was something that, was positive in scouts' minds. But it's still, he's not the biggest guy. You're going to have to make adjustments to your play style. One coordinator I talked to said, look at Anthony Richardson. Jaden Daniels takes hits like Anthony Richardson, and Anthony Richardson is a huge guy. He's 6'5" and like 235 pounds, and he got hurt 3 times in 4 games last season. Cam Newton was the MVP in 2015. He was out of the league 5 years later because just the hits add up, and those are much larger individuals. And so, you're going to need him to get down. You're going to need him to be able to curb it. There's always Lamar Jackson comparisons a little bit to Jaden Daniels, even though from what scouts and coaches say he's a little bit more straight line. But Lamar has had this remarkable knack through his career. He's never really taken the big hit. Kyler Murray has the same thing where Russell Wilson, these guys have figured out how to get down at the right moment, how to not take yards off the table, but to get down, don't take that hit. Jaden Daniels is going to be getting hit by bigger, faster, stronger people in the NFL. You're going to have to work with them on that and emphasize it, but that's a big part of his game. He's also a really, really talented passer, and some people think just in terms of pure passing ability, not arm strength, Rich, some people will put Jaden Daniels as the most talented passer in this draft.
All right, and then we get to, and this is Tom Pelissero you're listening to of the NFL Network with Rich Eisen, and then we get to the flap about Top Golf, which was sports radio chum in the water most of last week. Like, oh my God, the individual attention that Jaden Daniels was supposed to get. he didn't get, and his agent liked a tweet where Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk was talking about how they diluted this attention, and this was such a stupid move to do it this way. This is from Jay Gruden, and I put this out last night. Whatever you think of Jay Gruden as a head coach, he's pretty much of a wise ass and sometimes funny. And he wrote this. He said, "No one said who won the Top Golf Challenge. No doubt JJ went for the short shots." That's JJ McCarthy. Penix Jr. tried the long left and long right targets. Drake hit driver and tried to hit it over the fence. Jaden obviously was on the phone with his agent. Maybe that's why they went to Top Golf, to find that out. As far as the group visits go, Pelissero says this is not the big deal that you think it is, and it's a lot more common than you might think.
There are different teams that have always done these group visits. I know the Vikings under Rick Spielman for years brought in all their 30 visits at once.
Yeah.
49ers have done group visits, and that's where Adam Peters, the general manager, comes from. So that's an idea he kind of took and applied there. I don't remember a time, though, that 4 of the guys there are quarterbacks.
Crazy.
And you're sitting on the number 2 overall pick. You also have to remember, these guys had time at the combine. They've obviously reviewed all the tape. Some of the players, like Michael Penix, was at the Senior Bowl. You have dinners around the pro days. You have a lot of different ways that you can be able to get time with them.
It's not like they don't know each other, Tom. It's just that you got one last swing at it, and I found it interesting that the prospects were willing to play along, that perhaps they didn't sit down and go, or maybe they did have a confab, these prospects with their agents and the representatives. They sit there and go, well, you can maybe schedule a one-on-one straight up conventional top 30 visit as your last with a team that might not really be interested in you, or might not have the firepower to come up to draft you, or might not be there. Or do you go along with what the Commanders want to do, and you got to be in it to win it? You got to buy that Powerball ticket by going into this mosh pit with the rest of the guys. Well,
I think this too, Rich. If this were a situation, let's say Chicago tried to do this. Hey, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and JJ McCarthy and Michael Penix, come on in. We're going to have all you guys and Caleb there at once. You're probably going to have a bunch of guys going, well, what are we really doing here? You're taking Caleb Williams. With Washington, part of the dynamic is there really is uncertainty at minimum within the league. And I know Adam Peters said internally they're getting close. You've got a lot of voices involved in that process, from Josh Harris, the new owner. Bob Myers has been a part of this process. Magic Johnson's in the process. Obviously, Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury. You're trying to work toward finalizing what you're going to do. But I do know this. There are fans of Drake May and have been through the course of the process. Certainly, Jaden Daniels is so dynamic. He's the Heisman Trophy winner. He's got fans there. And there were people coming out of the Washington Pro Day, and I believe we talked about this, Rich, on the show, who were really intrigued by J.J. McCarthy. I know we haven't gotten to J.J. yet, Rich, and you watched as much of him as anybody in the world. I thought it was really interesting, having done these stories for years and talking to everybody. We can all laugh about the pro day thing and what are you really going to learn you didn't already know from somebody throwing 70 routes on air with no defense out there. But J.J. McCarthy, the response to that pro day is as strong as I can remember for anyone since maybe like Sam Bradford. It was that good. And I think that there were 2 factors in this. One of them was people had not seen JJ throw live in a lot of cases. And because Michigan had so many players, they've got, 20 plus draft eligible guys there. Head coaches were there, coordinators were there, position coaches were there. A bunch of people who probably hadn't studied a ton of JJ McCarthy on tape, they all walked away going, man, his arm is a lot better. I had one head coach say to me, I didn't know JJ could roll like that. I mean, he really impressed people in person. But also because he didn't throw as much, you didn't see him make all the throws. Some of the critiques of McCarthy are, well, you're running this run-dominant type of an offense. It's a lot of play action. There's guys who are wide open. It seems like at times he locks in onto that one guy, and he gets away with it a little bit because you're facing Big Ten teams, and you may not be facing the same types of DBs that you will be in the NFL. So to get him in that space and actually just see him make those throws, there were things that they saw there, deep shots too, you really hadn't seen on tape. So there were people who walked away, and certainly Washington people who walked away too. thinking at minimum, we really got to think hard about this. Everybody's been talking about Caleb, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels forever. JJ's the guy who I think realistically, if you had polled people within the league going to this season, there's no way people would have thought we were talking about him as a potential, if not certain, top 10, maybe top 5 pick in the NFL. He's done enough through the course of the process, obviously on the field, the winner, the moxie, the competitor, all that stuff's good. But the way that he interviewed, I was told he was brilliant when they got him in there. He really crushed the pre-draft process. That included the pro day. And at least if you're Washington or any team drafting up at the top, I had one head coach who I really trust, who again knows quarterbacks, and told me if I were Chicago this week, I'd be bringing in Caleb and JJ and grinding the bleep out of both of them, because there's not enough evidence to say Caleb's clearly the guy. That's how much of an impression JJ made on a lot of people within the league, and that's why in all likelihood he's going to go sooner than anybody would have thought if he had him line up these quarterbacks back in September.
So this could make your head explode, but J.J. McCarthy has emerged as such an attractive candidate that he went from clearly the number 4 guy at best, maybe even number 5 behind Penix. Now he's moved up to possibly, if you listen to Pelissero closely there, maybe consideration for the Bears at 1? Yeah. I don't know. This is what Adam Schefter put out today about the Commanders. Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Jaden Daniels knows he's entering the draft, not free agency, which is why he is ready to accept wherever he is selected and attempt to become the face of that franchise. While Daniels would have liked more face time with the Commanders during his last visit, which included 3 other top quarterbacks in the class, the now famous Top Golf event, the signs continue to point to Washington taking him number 2. Again, this is Schefter. The signs continue to point to Washington taking Daniels number 2. The Commanders have been highly impressed with Daniels' abilities, and they are not alone. One NFL head coach whose team is not in the quarterback market said he would take Daniels over Caleb Williams, who is expected to be drafted number 1 by the Bears. It's a no-brainer to me, the coach said. Jaden looks like the best guy in this draft. Another head coach compared Daniels to Baltimore quarterback Lamar Jackson. If you pick Daniels, you're getting Lamar 2.0, but he's further along as a passer than Lamar was when he came out, the coach said. So, here you have some general managers are saying, oh, J.J. McCarthy is so good, the Bears should consider taking him at 1. You have Louis Riddick was the one who said last week that he thought that he would take Daniels 1 if he was the Bears. And then you have others saying, well, maybe the analytics are telling Washington J.J. McCarthy's so good you take him number 2. I mean, it is just completely freaking nuts, and I don't think we've ever seen anything like this. We've had quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3 before, but we've kind of known what's going to happen. Now it seems fairly much of a consensus that Caleb Williams is going to go 1 to Chicago. But after that, it could be any one of the other 3. It could be Jaden Daniels, and if you listen to what Schefter's saying, people are telling him he's the best quarterback in the draft. Could be J.J. McCarthy, who others say, oh, he's so good, the Bears should consider him taking him number 1. And then Drake May, who may have the best quarterback body, NFL body, big and strong and fast, and may have the biggest, as they say, upside. So there's all that. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy. And that's why we have so much intrigue over the NFL draft. And at least we should get this out of the way early. There's also the Patriots factor. And their new general manager, with Belichick out the door, Elliott Wolf, said last week at his pre-draft news conference, they're open for business. But the latest is a Patriots source tells ESPN you can't win without a quarterback. So they're likely to stay there. They've got Jacoby Brissett now, if you weren't following that. Brissett, who hardly played here last year, but they like him. He could come in and be the starter early on. They also have Bailey Zappi still on the roster. Belichick liked him. He's gone, so who knows, how that's going to work long term. But I think that the feeling is this is an incredible quarterback draft, and if you're picking in the top 3 like New England is, top 2 like Washington, you don't pass up this opportunity. You don't trade the pick away hoping that your franchise quarterback will come down the line. As far as the general manager told Schefter that he reminds him of Lamar Jackson, he's not as thick as Lamar, but just think, if he's on that level, those 2 quarterbacks separated by 40 miles, I mean, that's a really cool thing that you have two quarterbacks of similar skill set at a young age. Remember, even though Jaden Daniels is just coming out, Lamar's only 26. I think Daniels is 24. So pie in the sky works out great for both teams. You could be looking at this for the next 10 to 12 years. These two incredibly talented quarterbacks separated by 40 miles. It's really a neat thing. All right, a little more on the Caps coming up in the next hour. And Al Michaels weighs in on the best ever. One of those summertime topics, a little early in the game, but Al's got some good thoughts on that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. 70 years ago today, an innovation in the NBA, which was huge and exists to this day, and some believe it saved the entire league. Eventually, they would have come to something like this, but Danny Biasone, a forgotten figure in basketball history, played a huge role in making the NBA more entertaining. It's a little much now. We got 8 series going on. It's a little much to consume. You know, you got to pick your spots, but we had 4 games on Saturday, 4 games yesterday, got more games coming up. And eventually we'll get it down to 2 teams, but my God, we're 2 months away from that happening. And, you know, it's funny, and we'll talk more about this later this hour, but when Danny Biasone came up with the 24-second clock, it was after the season was over. In 1954, the NBA Finals went 7 games, and they finished up April the 12th. There weren't as many rounds of playoffs, obviously, but the Finals go 7 games, and it's wrapped up 2 months sooner than it is now. And once the season is over, then you have the Board of Governors meetings or whatever they called it in those days, and they discussed rule changes, and they said, oh, yeah, we got to have a shot clock, and the rest is history. I did watch, though, on Saturday night, Saturday evening, I guess it was a 6 o'clock tip, the 76ers and the Knicks playing. Knicks hit a bunch of big threes down the stretch, and they won the game. Philadelphia made a nice run. Joel Embiid went out late in the second quarter after landing on his knee, and there were the hushed tones of, you know, Mike Breen and Doris Burke, like, you know, and he did come back and he played well and almost led them to victory, but the Knicks held on to win. So before the game, in the Friday news conference, Kelly Oubre, who was once a first-round pick of the Wizards, kind of a knucklehead, and eventually was sent out to sea, has drifted around the NBA, now plays for the Philadelphia 76ers. And he talked about playing at Madison Square Garden in the playoffs, and he said the fans are pretty crazy, you know. They have a pretty good culture of being wild and loving basketball to the root and the core of it. They call it the Mecca of basketball for a reason, Madison Square Garden. The lights are super bright. They're going to give celebrities those $100,000 free tickets just to be there and not care about the game, but that's what they do. I look forward to it, man. It's one of my favorite places to play. Well, I know Spike Lee would dispute you on that he has been a diehard Knicks fan his entire life. If you saw his biographical movie, Crooklyn, that's who he is. He's obsessed with the Knicks, and I'm sure pays the $100,000 or whatever it is. It's not $100,000 a game, but whatever he has to pay for a season of sitting courtside, he does that. And the legendary battles that he had drawn with Reggie Miller, that's part of NBA history. That's great stuff. I mean, come on. This is why Oubre is who Oubre is. Well, Ben Stiller, who sits in those seats, and I liked his dad better. I like Jerry Stiller better. And Stiller and Mira, his mom and dad, they were a great comedy team. Used to be on the Ed Sullivan Show all the time. I find Ben Stiller annoying. When I watch one of his movies, I'm sick of it halfway through it. So, you know, he is obviously popular and successful, and successful enough to pay for tickets at Madison Square Garden. And so he put out on Twitter before the game, he says, I think I care a lot more than you think that you thought I cared. Kelly Oubre, Whobre. Way to go. Way to go. So I don't know whether that – I didn't notice any, you know, real back and forth between the two of them. And Oubre, you know, he's, what is there, 6th best player, 7th best player? I don't know. But that you know, those guys who pay to sit courtside, he's sitting next to Chris Rock. I'm sure he pays for his tickets. That's kind of cool. When Woody Allen was an acceptable celebrity, used to see him sitting courtside. So, yeah, come on, Oubre, get with it on that. One other basketball thing before I jump back to the Caps and the hockey and what they have to do. Duke is losing Jeremy Roach, who had a year of eligibility left. He's going in the transfer portal, and he's going to Baylor. He's 6'2", started 108 games over 4 years with the Blue Devils, third-team All-ACC this past year. And you might say, well, if they're going to be a good team, why not have an experienced point guard for next year? Maybe this team is going to be good enough with who they're bringing in, and they got some of the top recruits in the country. They're going to win a championship. No. You got to clear the decks. That's the way it goes at this level. So he's played 4 years there. He's got a year of eligibility. He's got to go. You would think that would be a valuable asset going into next year. You've got somebody who played 4 years of college basketball, heck of a year, averaged 14 points, 3.3 assists, 42, almost 43% from three, and scored in double figures in all 4 of their NCAA tournament games. They got knocked out by NC State in the Elite Eight. But that's just the way things have to go. And so he is expected to step in at Baylor, which is, usually a team that's in contention for the Final Four. And the coach there, Bryce Drew, is elected to stay and turned down the Kentucky job. And they also have Tennessee big man Jonas Aidoo as a top 10 transfer. AIDOO. That's college basketball now. That's what happened with Connecticut. They got Cam Spencer, who had bounced around. He started at Loyola of Baltimore, went to Rutgers for a couple of years, comes in and is the steadying point guard that Connecticut needed. Played only 1 year, won his national championship. I don't think he's going to play in the NBA, but mission accomplished, and that's what they hope will happen with Mr. Roach as he makes the move to Waco, Texas. All right, Capitals. Not enough shots on goal. They had 21 shots. They had to be well into the 20s, Spencer Carbury, the coach, figured, or they wouldn't have a chance to win. And then on the power play, they were 0 for 4 and looked not good doing it. Here's Carbury.
Yeah, entries were a massive issue as everybody watched. So we got to start there, right, before we can even talk about the in-zone sequences and what we're looking for. We had a few in-zone sequences, but not nearly enough for as many power plays as we generated. So the entries for sure. We'll look at doing some different things personnel-wise. It's exactly as we thought it would be, from their diamond to the 1-3, all the things that they do. We just got to do a way better job, especially if there's going to be that many power plays moving forward.
Yeah, well, and power plays in the playoffs, you don't have as many expected, but, New York had 2 of them and Washington had 4, but they failed to get it done yesterday. Only 21 shots on goal, 0 for 4 on the power play. This is John Carlson, defenseman, who was one of the holdovers from the championship team. He knows what it takes to win at this time of the year. And the Rangers, at this point, look like they have it.
They're opportunistic. They're a good team. We know they're going to be able to bury chances. We know we can't be giving them 2-on-1s in the middle of the ice and stuff like that. It's nothing we didn't expect. Nothing we haven't talked about. We have a chance to play a lot better. And I think for us, just regroup and put our heads on, go back to work like we always have.
That's Game 2 coming up tomorrow night. Charlie Lindgren, who had really carried them, this is a team that's not scoring goals this year. As Barry Zerluga's got in his column today, Caps have won 21 goal games during the regular season, exactly half of their 40 wins. They scored more than 2 goals just once in their last 11 games and somehow finished on a 4-1-0 run, grabbing every point needed to be granted this opportunity to play in the playoffs, and a lot of the credit has gone to Charlie Lindgren. But the blitz that the Rangers had in that second period, when they scored 3 goals in just over 2 minutes, that's not gonna get it done. You can't give up 3 goals. I mean, Carberry's talking about if things go right, they can win 3-2 games. Well, you're not going to win 3-2 games when you give up 3 goals in just over 2 minutes. Here's Lindgren.
It's one game. We saw, how deadly they are when you give them, time and space. And I think it's one game. So didn't go our way tonight, and we'll have to bounce back next game.
And just anecdotally, what I notice about the NHL playoffs, and I've seen it so many times with the Caps over the years, it looks like they have control of a series, and then a game flips, and it's not unusual to see another team run off 3 in a row. That's not saying that the Caps are necessarily going to do it, but just because this happened in Game 1, where they were terrible in the power play, didn't have enough shots on goal, and then had this defensive meltdown during this short stretch of the second period, doesn't mean Game 2 is going to resemble that. And again, this is speaking with just a thumbnail knowledge of hockey, but just what I've seen over the years. So they go now for Game 2 tomorrow night in New York, and then Game 3 will be here on Friday, and Game 4 would be Sunday in Washington. If they go to 5, it's May 1st in New York. Can they play into May? We'll see, but who thought they'd still be playing at this point in the season, the way it looked with like 3 weeks to go? Like, they went through a stretch where they didn't win a game in six straight games. So you got to give them credit for getting this far. But when you get there, you'd like to be able to win. And if they can, we'll find out what happens tomorrow in Game 2. Sally Jenkins got a column today about the quarterback. This is nothing new, but in fact, let me find this. This is last week. Adam Peters talking to the media, and it was about whether or not it's easier to pick a quarterback now. He's been at this for 20 years, not as general manager. He's a general manager now, but this was the question about over the years where we've seen so many busts, and I'll get to the numbers that Sally has on that. But where we've seen so many busts, have general managers, personnel people, have they learned something about picking quarterbacks? And it sounds like the answer here from Adam Peters is no, we really haven't.
Before you even took this job, at the end of this college football season, did you have a quarterback that you liked the most? And if so, has that changed?
That's a great question. No, because before I took this job, we weren't really scouting quarterbacks, especially top of the draft quarterbacks, really hard.
Well, that's not really what I was looking for. Let me. This is this the one? Let's see. Decision timeline. No, this is okay. I think this is the question. It might have been a Scott Abraham question about. Picking the right quarterback. Yeah, this is what this was. This was about the pressure that you have the number 2 pick and to get it right, and whether, you've really learned anything about making that pick over the years.
The word pressure, I mean, how do you kind of embrace that, and do you see that in this situation where you hit this out of the park, huge for the franchise, it could go the other way as well?
Yeah. Do we look stressed? There is a lot of pressure, and it's great responsibility, and we take this very seriously, and that's why we've been working tirelessly on this and turning over every stone, and we want to do this obviously for this organization, but for this region, for this fan base, and for the men, the coaching staff, and the players on the field to get this right. So it's great responsibility. With that comes pressure, but that's what we signed up for.
Okay, so there's no real formula that they've come up with, and here are the numbers to back that up, as Sally Jenkins writes today, talking about Caleb Williams as the presumptive number 1 pick of the Bears. Data suggests that teams are wrong identifying franchise quarterbacks roughly 75% of the time. Last year, predictive analyst Warren Sharp surveyed 38 quarterbacks drafted in the first round since 2011. He found that they had started about 2,000 games. Their collective record, a half game below 500. That's 38 quarterbacks drafted in the first round since 2011. You take all their records together, they're a game below 500. Only 19% of the time did they make the playoffs. Bill Barnwell of ESPN did his own research, charting the career fates of quarterbacks taken in the first round since 1983. That's 41 years there. He found that 27.5% achieved what he defines as franchise status, meaning established winners for their teams. The Post Neil Greenberg limited his analysis to quarterbacks taken in the top 5 since 2011 and found the odds of landing a franchise quarterback even worse than a coin flip. Yeah, and you take Barnwell's analysis there of 83. Remember, 83, you had 3 franchise quarterbacks. They went to a total of, let's see, Elway went to 4, or was it 5? I think he went to 5, 1, 2. Dan Marino went to 1, and Jim Kelly went to 4. They didn't win a lot of Super Bowls, only 2 Super Bowl wins for them, but to make it to a total of, 10 Super Bowls between 3 quarterbacks, that's pretty good. That's pretty darn good. So you're looking at quarterbacks taken in the first round since 83, 27.5% achieved franchise status. That's franchise status for 3 of them. So now you're factoring in all the others that have happened since 1984. It's not a high success rate. Sally did talk to Phil Simms, and Phil is not really a draft analyst. I'm sorry, Chris Simms, who does analyze the draft. Excuse me. So he spends a lot of time doing that. And Simms, you know, you probably heard some of his analysis. He works with Mike Florio and does his own internet stuff. He says he calls Caleb Williams a cut above all of them, not just because of the howitzer arms, his escapability, but because of the context of his playmaking. I watched some games, and he dropped back 40 times. He was under pressure on 30 of them and got out of them 25 times. Daniels, he says, has similar ability and is Simms' clear-cut number 2 and probably would be number 1 in any other year. He rates Bo Nix, Penix, and McCarthy as a step down between those two, and Drake May is his number 6. So, you know, everybody's got a different opinion on this. But, you know, Chris Simms, not Phil Simms, but Chris Simms, who studies the draft, is saying that he's clearly the 6th best quarterback in this draft, and he could go as high as number 2 to Washington. We don't know. Nuts. All right. For those of you who celebrate, we got night 1 of Passover coming up tonight, and it's a holiday I always look forward to. We have a big Seder at my sister's house. My sister Evo makes the best matzo balls in Rockville. Looking forward to that. If you are celebrating Zisen Pesach to you, and I will be back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Tony is next.